direct by plaintiff's attorney. Did Paul Friedman return to the home in which you were residing after he got out of jail? Yes, he did. And where were you living when he was released? 8053.5 Centennial Drive, St. Louis, Missouri. Is that just a one-family home? Yes, well, it is a duplex, you know. And was there anyone living in that house with you when Mr. Friedman moved back? Yes, my mother was there. And what is her name? Alice T. Brooks. Anybody else? No, nobody at present. At that time? No. Your daughter, was she living with you? Yes, she was. And is that Debbie? Debbie and Kathy Lou. Kathy Lou is not included in all this. Who is not included? Kathy Lou. Have you a child by a previous marriage? Yes. Kathy Lou is a child by a previous marriage? Yes. How old is she? 14 and a half. Now, when Mr. Friedman was released and returned to society, did he find work? Yes. And how long did he work? He worked approximately 2 years for the Salvation Army. During the period of about 2 years, how did Mr. Friedman behave toward you? In other words, how did he treat you? Good, he always did when he was home. Did he remain at home for the 2 years following his release from prison? Yes, because he got off probation in August of that year. He left town in 1989, and in 1989 he was released from probation. And then, as a part of the sentencing that the court gave him in the spring of 1986, he was to serve a number of years on probation. Yes, 3 years. And is it your testimony that, to your knowledge, he was released from probation in 1989? Yes. Do you recall the month? I believe it was August. Haven't you got the criminal record? I don't, Your Honor. Where is that record? Do you have it? I believe it is on file in the clerk's office. Well, did he leave your house in 1989? Yes. Would you describe to the court the circumstances of his leaving? He left and was gone. Then all of a sudden I found he was married to somebody else. He had married somebody else in Atlantic City. Now, how did you find this out? By so many people telling me that he had went away on a honeymoon, and then I began checking myself. Did you look to records, official records, to find out he had been married? Yes. What was the name of the individual that he had married? Clara Dinsdale. Had you known her before? No. Did you ever meet her? Yes. And when did you first meet her? September 12th of that same year. Is that 1989? Yes, it was. And where did you meet her? In her home. And was Mr. Friedman with her at that time? Yes. And did you talk to him about his marriage to Clara Dinsdale? Yes. And did he say he had purchased a marriage license, had a blood test, and had a marriage ceremony performed with her? Yes. And did he say that he had taken a trip with her to Atlantic City? Yes. Now, did you and Mr. Friedman resume your marital relationship on September 12, 1989? Yes. He left the house the same night. He came home with me on September 12, 1989. Now, how long did he stay with you? Until October of 1989. When was your daughter born? Which daughter, counsel? Becky Ann. When was Becky Ann born? May 8, 1990. And where was she born? St. Louis Community Hospital. Now, was Mr. Friedman living with you at that time? No. Did he go with you to the hospital? Yes, he did. And as far as you know, was he at the hospital when Becky Ann was born? Yes. Shortly after the birth of Becky Ann, did you send out announcements of her birth? Yes. I show you what appears to be a birth announcement. That will be cross complainants 2 for identification. Cross complainants 2 for identification. As you can see, it bears the signature of Julie Friedman and Paul Friedman. Now, this refers to the birth of Becky Ann Friedman, St. Louis Community Hospital, May 8, 1990, 11:41 a.m. Now, does this bear the signature of your husband? Yes, it does. The written words Paul Friedman are in his handwriting? Yes, they are. Is that the signature that he normally used? Yes, it is. Does your signature appear on that? Yes, mine is above his. Now, after Becky Ann was born, I presume you returned to the home at 8053.5 Centennial Drive. Is that correct? That is correct. Did you bring the child with you? Yes. Was Mr. Friedman living in the home at that time? No, he wasn't. How many times was that? Okay, one more time. One last time. Did Paul Friedman return to the home in which you were residing after he got out of jail? Yes, he did. And where were you living when he was released? 8053.5 Centennial Drive, St. Louis, Missouri. Is that just a one-family home? Yes, well, it is a duplex, you know. And was there anyone living in that house with you when Mr. Friedman moved back? Yes, my mother was there. And what is her name? Alice D. Brooks. Anybody else? No, nobody at present. At that time? No. Your daughter, was she living with you? Yes, she was. Is that Debbie? Debbie and Kathy Lou. Kathy Lou is not included in all this. Who is not included? Kathy Lou. Have you a child by a previous marriage? Yes. Kathy Lou is a child by a previous marriage? Yes. How old is she? 14 and a half. Now, when Mr. Friedman was released and returned to society, did he find work? Yes. How long did he work? He worked approximately 2 years for the Salvation Army. During the period of about 2 years, how did Mr. Friedman behave toward you? In other words, how did he treat you? Good, he always did when he was home. Did he remain at home for the 2 years following his release from prison? Yes, because he got off probation in August of that year. He left town in 1989, and in 1989 he was released from probation. Then, as a part of the sentencing that the court gave him in the spring of 1986, he was to serve a number of years on probation. Yes, 3 years. And is it your testimony that, to your knowledge, he was released from probation in 1989? Yes. Do you recall the month? I believe it was August. Haven't you got the criminal record? I don't, Your Honor. Where is that record? Do you have it? I believe it is on file in the clerk's office. Well, did he leave your house in 1989? Yes. Would you describe to the court the circumstances of his leaving? He left and was gone. Then all of a sudden I found he was married to somebody else. He had married somebody else in Atlantic City. Now, how did you find this out? By so many people telling me that he had went away on a honeymoon, and then I began checking myself. Did you look to records, official records, to find out he had been married? Yes. What was the name of the individual that he had married? Clara Dinsdale. Had you known her before? No. Did you ever meet her? Yes. And when did you first meet her? September 12 of that same year. Is that 1989? Yes, it was. And where did you meet her? In her home. And was Mr. Friedman with her at that time? Yes. Did you talk to him about his marriage to Clara Dinsdale? Yes. And did he say he had purchased a marriage license, had a blood test, and had a marriage ceremony performed with her? Yes. And did he say that he had taken a trip with her to Atlantic City? Yes. Now, did you and Mr. Friedman resume your marital relationship on September 12, 1989? Yes. He left the house the same night. He came home with me on September 12, 1989. Now, how long did he stay with you? Until October of 1989. When was your daughter born? Which daughter, counsel? Becky Ann. Now, when was Becky Ann born? May 8, 1990. And where was she born? St. Louis Community Hospital. Now, was Mr. Friedman living with you at that time? No. Did he go with you to the hospital? Yes, he did. And as far as you know, was he at the hospital when Becky Ann was born? Yes. Shortly after the birth of Becky Ann, did you send out announcements of her birth? Yes. I show you what appears to be a birth announcement. That will be cross complainants 2 for identification. Cross complainants 2 for identification. As you can see, it bears the signature of Julie Friedman and Paul Friedman. This refers to the birth of Becky Ann Friedman, St. Louis Community Hospital, May 8, 1990, 11:41 a.m. Now, does this bear the signature of your husband? Yes, it does. The written words Paul Friedman are in his handwriting? Yes, they are. Is that the signature that he normally used? Yes, it is. Does your signature appear on that? Yes, mine is above his. Now, after Becky Ann was born, I presume you returned to the home at 8053 and a half Centennial Drive. Is that correct? That is correct. Did you bring the child with you? Yes. Was Mr. Friedman living in the home at that time? No, he wasn't. All right, 225. 225 for boys. Starts with question by defense attorney. Okay, ready? Your particular unit, the Major Narcotics Unit, is it only you that uses this frequency? By you, I am talking about Los Angeles Police Department, Narcotics Division, a major violator section frequency. Okay, I understand that. Is it yours exclusively? Yes, I have never heard anybody else on that frequency besides people you were working with, besides major violators. In other words, you have never been out working and heard an officer talking on that unit who wasn't concerned with major narcotic crimes? That's correct. Okay. Now, so this must be assigned to you by somebody in the higher up or somebody who handles administration, right? Sir, I am sure the FAA or FCC assigns it, and then it gets assigned to us. They don't privy me to that. Okay. Now, is there more than one channel on the unit you are using to converse back and forth with Mr. Harden and the other detectives for that matter? There is only one channel, sir, so it is preset and you don't ever change it. Is that correct? If I wanted to go to other handles, I would. I would if the situation presented itself to. But generally on surveillances, we use one channel. Okay. And if you went to another channel, would you know how to get back to the channel that involves narcotics? Yes, sir, I would. Is that on a dial or buttons or what? It is. Some have dials, others have buttons. Mine is a dial. Okay. And would you dial a particular number? And I'm not going to ask you for your number, you know, but let's assume you know that number. Do you punch it in or type it in, or is it like a radio dial? Mine is a dial that you would have to place on a certain number and then place another dial on another set of numbers. When you get those two numbers together, then you would be on our frequency. Is this a little more than just going around like a radio, you know, trying to pick up a channel, or like, you know, people have CBs and they listen into police talk and stuff. And could a CB guy just dial along and pick that up? I am not familiar with CBs. I don't know, sir. So there is two dials, and the numbers that you put on have to be specifically matched before you can hear your other officers, right? Yes. And that hasn't changed for the last 11 or 12 years? Yes. The radios have changed. The heads of the radios have changed considerably, but that is only state of the art. Excuse me for just a moment. All right, excuse me. Thank you, Your Honor. Is the channel you use, or this frequency, is it, in your opinion, a confidential channel? By that I mean, I am not sure exactly what I mean, excuse me. Is this channel's frequency known throughout the police department? Would a patrolman know how to handle the use? If you wanted to get in touch with a detective, for instance, who is investigating major narcotics? No, sir, they wouldn't have the frequency. They wouldn't know about it? I don't believe they would. It is a narcotics frequency. I mean, do you try to keep this number or numbers in confidence just between the narcotic detectives? Sir, I don't even know the number, so it is. I don't know how to answer that question. You mean you don't recall how many days you were actually involved in this surveillance? Is that correct? No, I don't. Just approximately a 2-week period. Were you involved in a surveillance which led you to the area of Canary Street in Costa Mesa? Yes. And were you following somebody? Yes, sir. Who were you following? At that time, a suspect, Perez. And do you recall what date that was? I believe that was a Sunday. About the 27th, does that sound? Yes, that sounds about right. Sounds right? Were you and your fellow officers talking on the radio? Yes. As you approached Canary? I don't know. I was somewhat away from the surveillance at the time. There was a conversation on the radio. Do you recall how many cars were involved in the surveillance at that time when you were approaching Canary following Mr. Perez? There were approximately 5 to 6 cars under surveillance. And when he is making turns, does somebody announce he is turning? Yes. And do they announce where somebody else should go, or is there somebody directing all the cars, or just, I am going to go this way? It is not really coordinated by one guy. What is stated is the man, as we refer to as the point man, states the direction of travel, and the following vehicles take up other positions throughout the surveillance in order to either intercept or then become a point vehicle. Kind of try to maybe keep it like an envelope, and he is enclosed, you know, north, south, front, maybe even ahead of him or behind him. On occasion up front, yes, we try to maintain the integrity of the surveillance so that the suspect doesn't get lost. So he can't get away from you, or at least if he does, it is going to be difficult for him to do, correct? Yes. And that is the object of the surveillance. The object is to keep the suspect under observation. And you were talking all this time. You are not trying to maintain radio silence? No. Excuse me. Somebody says he's turning this way and you might move, and if you see him, you say, well, he is turning the other way. Is that correct? That's correct. Mr. Cooper, I think it is time that I am going to have to break now. I gather there will be substantial testimony from Officer Kearney. Is that correct? Well, yeah. It will be another 10, 15 minutes at least. I think I will have to break it at this point. Does Mr. Garcia personally waive his right to a continuous preliminary hearing so the court can take up duty matters and in custody matters? Yes, he does, Your Honor. Would you put that on the record, please? Okay, Claudia, tell me more.
We need defense attorney, Mr. Betts.
Defense to Mr. Mitchell.
I am the witness.
I'm for the plaintiff, Mr. Senjo, S-E-N-J-O.
Okay, and we're starting off with margin Mr. Senyo.
In any event, there was sufficient crisis with the NCUA that the chairman of the board, for whatever reason, departed.
Wait a minute.
He has said that. But didn't you perceive that event at that time as being a possible threat to your position?
Not his resignation, no.
The events that led up to this resignation, though, did you perceive them as being a possible threat to your continued tenure as president?
Always a threat, very possible.
And that threat was increased by the problems that you had with the NCUA starting in 81 or 82?
Well, someone always has to be the responsible one, and I would be in that position no matter what.
So as I understand what you are saying, since you were the responsible party, your job was in more jeopardy after the difficulty started with the NCUA than it was before?
Naturally.
Okay, let's get up to the events of May. Pardon me. The date that you discharged Mr. Chris was March 15, 1985, was it not?
That's correct.
Okay. Now I want to ask you about your state of mind at that time. Was it your state of mind as of the day that you discharged Mr. Chris that he was a probationary employee?
Yes, it was.
And was it your state of mind up until the time that the lawsuit was filed or served that he was a probationary employee?
Yes.
Is it still your state of mind that he was a probationary employee?
Yes.
When you discharged Mr. Chris, you were familiar with that credit union's personnel manual?
Yes.
And was it your intention at the time you discharged him to comply with the personnel manual?
I believe so, yes.
And in complying with the personnel
Manual.
pardon me, in complying with the personnel manual, you complied with those provisions that pertain to probationary employees, did you not?
No, the provisions in the personnel manual are 6 months, and we had arranged with Mr. Crift to be 1 year.
He is talking about what you did in his termination.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
You regarded him then, and you still regard him as a probationary employee at the time of the discharge. Counsel is essentially correct. When you discharged him, you felt that the procedures that you were using in the discharge had to comply with those portions of the personnel manual that related to probationary employees?
If you ever thought about it.
If you thought about it at all.
Go ahead and answer the question.
I don't quite understand what you are talking about.
At the time you discharged him, you thought he was a probationary employee?
I knew he was.
You certainly intended to comply with the personnel manual?
I would say yes.
Okay. Did you believe at the time you discharged him that you had to discharge him for cause?
No.
Did you think you had cause to discharge him?
Yes.
Was it your state of mind on March 15, 1985, that full-time regular employees, that is, people who passed their probationary period, had to be discharged for cause?
Yes.
Okay, and if Mr. Chris had been a full-time regular employee, he would have to have been discharged for cause, would he not?
Yes.
I would like to have you itemize all of the reasons that existed in March of 1985 for which he was discharged for cause.
All of the reasons?
Yes, sir.
If you want to refer to any documents, you certainly can, if that would be helpful to you.
Mr. Anton, let's categorize them first.
I would say insubordination and in not doing what I particularly requested or ordered to be done.
Okay, the general categories are insubordination and not doing what you wanted done.
Right.
Any other categories?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
Well, let me see if we can rule some things out, okay? You didn't discharge him, for example, for embezzlement.
No.
And you have no evidence that he embezzled anything?
Not to my knowledge.
And you didn't discharge him for any criminal conduct?
Nothing that has come to surface at this point.
Okay. You didn't discharge him because he had been dating or living with one of the former employees?
No.
So he was not discharged for nepotism?
No.
Whether he was or was not dating her was irrelevant to the discharge, correct?
Well,
You answered yes, did you not?
no, I started to say to the discharge.
Yeah.
The question is, was it totally irrelevant in his mind?
I don't think it had anything to do with the discharge, other than it might have affected some of his decisions at work, but It was not one of the reasons I discharged him.
It wasn't directly related to the discharge?
It wasn't directly related. I don't care who he sleeps with.
Was it indirectly related?
Indirectly, it may have been.
How?
Judgment of how he would respond to his girlfriend's actions or this type of stuff. But it was pretty well known that he favored her and, but had it been directly related, I think I would have covered it.
Okay, I'm still trying to rule out categories. You didn't discharge him because he represented a threat to your continued existence as president.
No,
You didn't discharge him because he was friendly with one or more of the board members.
no,
You didn't discharge him because he had instituted a filing system that was different than the one that you had been working with.
yes, the filing system had something to do with it.
The two general grounds of discharge that I have noted here were insubordination and not doing what you, as president, wanted done.
That's right,
So the institution of the filing system relates to one of those two items.
that's right.
Are there any other general categories that you can think of that were grounds for discharge?
I'm sure that his behavioral outbursts, anytime we got into a managerial meeting, if we didn't agree, why, he would have a big outburst. I am sure that influenced it. However, I didn't list that as one of the things.
Do you list it now?
No, not particularly. If he was out really to want to do what I wanted done and what we wanted to do as a team and wasn't devious about it, I don't believe I would consider his temperament as grounds to dismiss.
You are asking for general categories and not specific categories.
I am asking for the grounds in which he discharged him.
He is giving you general grounds.
Wait a minute, let me just ask him a question. I want you to indicate to me the grounds upon which you discharged him, and I take it from what you said that insubordination was one of the grounds. His failure to do what you wanted him to do was another ground. And then you have indicated to me that he had a volatile temperament from time to time, but I also believe I heard you say that that was not one of the reasons for discharging him.
Just a minute, there is ambiguity here, talking about,
I will ask the questions.
you are,
You are not asking the questions, I am asking the questions.
It is ambiguous.
I will rephrase it.
specific grounds
Did you discharge him because he had a volatile temper?
as a specific reason.
Did you discharge him because he had a volatile temper?
I am not going to let him answer that question.
That could fall under the insubordination category.
That could be part of it. You're going from generalities to specifics. I am going to let him answer.
Mr. Anton, I take it that Mr. Crisp's temperament did create problems with the two of you communicating?
Very much so.
Okay, when you wrote Defendant's Exhibit 57, which is the notice that you gave him at the time of discharge, was it your effort at the time that you gave him that notice to itemize all of the grounds for which he was discharged, at least the general grounds, as opposed to specific instances?
Well, let me read it for just a minute.
What is that exhibit?
Exhibit 57.
Talking about general grounds
Uh-huh,
without specific instances?
uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay, now, what is your question regarding that?
Was it your intent at the time that you wrote Exhibit 57 to cover all of the general grounds upon which you were discharging?
I would not say all in infinite detail, but in generality, I would say the bulk of the things that I would continue to work with.
Okay, one of the other things that I want to rule out is that you didn't discharge him because he was lazy or didn't put in enough hours on the job.
No, his particular position did not have specific 20 hours or 60 hours. I would say no.
I'm ruling out grounds for discharge. He wasn't lazy or didn't devote enough time to the job.
Now, he has testified that he didn't follow through with things that he was asked to do.
But that's a totally different thing than putting in enough hours.
May or may not be.
I have a question as to what you're asking.
Okay, that's fine. You didn't discharge him because he showed up to work late?
No,
Okay, and you didn't discharge him because he wasn't there on the job for the amount of time that somebody in his position should have been on the job? That wasn't one of the reasons?
no,
And you were aware that he worked weekends from time to time?
yes.
Your criticism is that he wasn't doing the right things, isn't it?
A multitude of things.
Your criticism isn't. Is it not that he wasn't putting in time? Your criticism is that he wasn't putting it in the right way.
He was putting in time, and I felt not in the right way.
When did you first become aware that Mr. Crisp's insubordination was a sufficient problem might lead to his discharge.
Wait a minute, that is extremely speculative.
I think it's very specific.
It is not, you used the word might.
Let's find out what he has to say.
If you can answer it, go ahead. I think it is extremely vague.
Let me rephrase it then. When did you first become aware that Mr. Crisp's insubordination was sufficient so that it might be a problem with regard to his continued tenure?
I could not give you the exact date.
Was it before or after January 10, 1985?
Restate that question?
Was it before or after?
No. Who you are?
The defense was Ms. Hastings, Hasting.
For defense to Ms. Church.
I am the witness.
For plaintiff, Mr. Dwyer, D-W-Y-E-R.
Okay, and we are starting off with examination by Mr. Dwyer.
Good morning, Mrs. Gates. My name is Gregory Dwyer, and you've met me before. We're here at your attorney's office today to take your deposition.
For the record, my name is Connie Hastings and I represent Mrs. Gates.
And I'm Susan Church. I'm here on behalf of the minor child, Chelsea.
Also present is your husband, Mr. Gates. Before I take your deposition, I have a few preliminary questions I'd like to ask you. First of all, have you ever had your deposition taken before?
Yes,
How long ago was that?
probably close to 4 years ago.
In what connection was that?
We were in litigation over a building contract.
Other than that time, have you ever had your deposition taken?
No.
Okay, let's go over a few preliminary things just to help you and to help the court reporter make a nice, clean transcript and record of this. First of all, although this deposition is taken in the informality of Ms. Hastings' office, it has the same force and effect as if it were in a court of law. It's important that you understand that.
It's also important when Mr. Gates' deposition is taken later on today that he understand that as well.
This is true. We'll go over the ground rules again for him. The statements that you give to questions today can and most likely will be used in a trial of this matter or any subsequent hearing regarding the issues that you and Mr. Gates can agree on, okay?
Uh-huh.
Amy, if the question calls for a yes or no answer, please articulate yes or no, as opposed to or because the court reporter may have some difficulty trying to decipher what you intended by your answer.
It's very important that you listen very carefully to the questions that I ask you and not to answer a question you don't understand. Like many attorneys, sometimes my questions get wordy. You're entitled to a clean question that you understand. And if my question doesn't make any sense to you, I want you to ask me to rephrase it, and I will. Once it finally makes sense to everybody, then you answer it, okay?